I mean, at least.
We're going to call the March 18th Emmaus Borough Council meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start with personal appeals part one. If anyone has a personal appeal, please approach the podium, sign in, write down your name and number. Nobody online, hearing none. Does anybody have a community minute to bring forward? Hearing none. We have no presentations tonight. Do I have a motion to accept the March 4th council meeting minutes?
So moved.
Councilwoman Baumgartner, second by Mr. Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? We have no decisions on bids. We have quite a few communications this meeting. And events requests. We're going to go through these and assign what needs to be assigned to the proper committees. Most of these are going to be held by just transferred over to the administration office. Knaus Homestead is requesting their harvest event on October 26th. That is a reoccurring event. They will be selling alcohol at these events. So would anyone like to make a motion to approve alcohol sales at the Knaus Homestead Harvest Festival on October 26th? Mr. Brown, is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Watt, any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? 7 ayes. The next one is the Knaus Homestead Peach Festival. And that is going to be on August 10th. Same thing. They're looking for alcohol sales there as well. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the alcohol sales?
So moved.
Mr. Hohenscheid, second. Mr. Brown, any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? 7 ayes. Next up is Mr. Gene Clock is put in an application for volunteer for the Historical Commission. That I will assign to CRD to set up an interview. We have a resignation from Wayne Lahr from the Emmaus Arts Commission effective March 11th. We will accept his resignation and thank him for being a longtime member of the Arts Commission. We have another resignation for Aaron Berry for the wheelchair transportation operator. It looks like he's moving and no longer going to be in the area. Thank you, Aaron. Our next letter of resignation is from our assistant borough manager, Sarah Jarrett Eaton. Her last day will be March 22nd. Sarah, not only did I have the pleasure of being part of hiring you and working with you the last few years, but sad to read this, but I'm personally happy for you of, you getting going where you're going. We have a resignation of Leanne Rutsch. She was an EMT, and her last day will be March 22nd. And then the Emmaus Run-In is hosting an event on May 16th. They're requesting use of the Triangle, alcohol sales and stuff like that. We're going to have a Parks and Rec meeting here later next week. So we're going to assign that to Parks and Rec. You guys can go through that, and they're also asking for alcohol, but we'll wait to do that at the next meeting after you guys discuss everything. And then I received a letter. Oh, go ahead, Brent.
It says this is the second year they're holding it.
I don't remember this.
I don't remember either, but they said they held it in 23. That's all. I'm fine with discussing it, but if nobody
Do you
remembers.
remember
it-
this event?
I don't.
yeah, I don't-
We talked about it. I don't remember the event.
I just had a quick question.
Heather.
So they say it's a BYOB for alcohol. Is that something that needs to be voted on?
I'm assuming that's probably the,
I think that's
The
something,
theater.
again, so I think the owner of the Run-In is going to be at the Parks and Rec Committee meeting. So I think that's where we'll have the opportunity to ask those questions.
It's a valid question in terms of what type of permit they'll need from LCB and whether we have liability issues. So we do need to discover that.
We don't have their insurance information either.
Yeah, we don't have anything yet.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, if they had done this before, we would have that information.
thank you.
The next, I've received a letter from Doris Farr expressing concern about the train bridge over South 10th Street. I talked to South 10th, okay. I talked to Shane, and we'll respond to her. Next up, Borough Engineers Report. We have none. Solicitors Report.
No report, progress.
Thank you. Unfinished business part 1, we have none. We have no new business. We have no unfinished business part 2. Does anyone have an item not on the agenda? Hearing none. Madam Mayor's report.
Thank you. You have my first quarterly report of this year. If anybody has any questions, fire away. If not, progress.
Thank you. Committee reports. Public Works, Mr. Anders.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I have one item for official action, and that is the retention of a probationary employee, Tyler
Llewellyn.
Llewellyn, thank you. Tyler has met his probationary period ending on March 15th with obtaining his Class A CDL license. That was a requirement, and he's also met all other requirements for the position. So with that, we'd like to not extend, how would I say it, Shane? To
Retain.
retain him in his position
As a full-time employee.
as a full-time Class 2, correct, employee.
I'll second it.
Motion by Mr. Anders, second by Mr. Lavenberg. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Oppose? 7 ayes.
The committee did meet on, March 11th. Our meeting minutes are attached, and our next meeting is Monday, April 8th at 4:45 PM via Zoom and in person. With that, I'll report progress.
Thank you. Next up is Health, Sanitation, and Codes. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next meeting is tomorrow, the 19th. We'll be talking about the 7 hot topics in regards to the zoning ordinance in DeSaldo. Also, we're going to reconvene the task force on March 25th. The email has been sent out and everybody's been invited. The old task force Nigel Watt, Mike Gibson, and some others that have been on that task force are coming back. So they can also discuss the 7 hot topics as well. So the game plan here is over, hopefully by June, maybe July, we can get something back to you. And by bringing the task force in and talking about these topics, I'm thinking about 2 to 3 meetings. And then with the committee as well, we should be able to iron some things out. There are things to discuss, but I'm being hopeful. So progress.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation, Mr. Honchad.
Our next meeting is this coming Thursday, the 21st at 4:45. That's going to be Zoom only this month, and I'll report progress.
Thank you. Public Safety, Ms. Baumgartner.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have one item for official action. We've had a wide pool of applicants for the Police Department data entry clerk, and we have somebody to officially hire for the position. We held interviews. She was outstanding, had a great personality, has background that suits the position as well, and she was very excited to join us. She's passed all background checks, so we are eager to welcome her aboard. And I would like to put a motion to hire Julie Nibel as the full-time Police Department data entry clerk.
Motion by Ms. Baumgartner. Is there a
Second.
second? Mr. Labenberg? Any further discussion?
I just concur what Shannon said. We're very happy with who we got, so.
I would agree. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? 7 ayes.
Thank you. We have our meeting notes attached, and our next meeting will be Wednesday, April 10th at 9 a.m. in person and on Zoom. Progress.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
can I just add some discussion on the public safety meeting notes, specifically the item regarding the petition for the stop signs on Liberty Street?
Yeah, go ahead.
So looking through the notes, just a couple of things that I wanted to address. One thing that was mentioned was the possibility of looking at a watch children sign. We do already have one right there at the curve. So I don't know that a second one would necessarily, and I don't believe that the one that we have there is effective. And then it also came up, I saw that it didn't appear that speed was a concern. Part of the reason for that in the discussions with the neighbors and in the research that I had done was that speed can't be a factor in determining a stop sign. So it wasn't brought up for fear that it would kind of end the discussion right there. But speed is very much a factor at that curve rather. And it's really a combination of the speed, the limited sight line, and people driving, kind of cutting that curve so that they're driving on the wrong side of the road. I'm right there. It's a regular occurrence to hear horns honking because somebody will come zipping up around on the wrong side or going the other way on the wrong side, and they'll hit their horns. I've on several occasions, once I had a car in my front yard, and at least twice that I know of, people have hit the curb coming around that on that curve. One very recently because there's a chunk taken out of the curb right in front of my house where someone must have hit it just within the past few weeks. So it's not just the speed, it's not just the sight lines, it's not just people, cutting it and trying to make it a straight line. It's really the combination that, I think really is, it can be a recipe for disaster. When we first moved into the house and when we first had our son, he was pretty much the only young child. Now the whole neighborhood is filled with young children. And I do hope that the committee and, all involved will take a closer look at this. Whether it's stop signs, whether it's a speed bump, I don't know what the solution should be. I think a stop sign or the stop signs would be effective, but I just hope that the conversation doesn't end here.
Can I respond, Mr. Valiant?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So to elaborate on the minutes, it is something that we're investigating. There was some concern because as you researched, speed cannot be a factor in determining a stop sign.
Right.
That's come up several times for various stop signs that we've considered. But there are also other requirements. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Just the accident history is
Yeah.
part of it as well. There's no accident history for that area.
Mhm.
And we
Right.
have to go back 5 years and review that to see how many accidents have actually happened. And at this point, we have none.
So,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
No, I'm done. Go ahead.
I mean, so there's various things that you can look at in a traffic study. Obviously, historically for a stop sign, the accident count is a key. However, they can also look at, is it a blind turn? Is it a blind intersection?
Unique
Other unique circumstances that might occur at that intersection. So there's other things that you can factor in. It doesn't have to just be accident history, but accident history, I think, tends to dominate the decision when they're recommending a stop sign at an intersection.
Yeah, and that's my fear, is that we will one day have an accident history at that intersection, and hopefully we can find a way to avoid that. Thank you.
Yeah, they're continuing to follow up and discuss. It's just, some of the factors that have to be considered for implementing a stop sign. So the other layer would be if there are concerns about maybe slowing down, that there can be other factors we explore as to how to do that. If, we're finding the data is not supporting
Thank you.
that conclusion. So we are continuing to explore it. We haven't forgotten it. And that's all progress for public safety.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. General Administration, Mr. Labenberg.
No action to be taken this evening. As you see in your notes, there's 3 pages from our meeting that you can read through, see what we discussed and what we're working on. This Thursday or Wednesday, we have a meeting at 9 a.m. I'm requesting that we meet in person. It's not required. I mean, we'll still be on Zoom, but with that, I report progress.
Thank you. Next up is Budget and Finance, which is myself. Tonight for consideration is approving a contract with Gannett Fleming, their proposal for their engineer services for well 1, 2. It's going to be for the final design, permitting, and the bid phase services. It is a contract for $385,000 for the work. We discussed it quite a bit in the meeting, and we're definitely recommending that we move forward with this. So we have a motion to
So moved.
Mr. Labenberg, second. Mr. Anders, any further discussion?
Just that we have money that we more or less have budgeted for this through our special fee for the water, the extra $15 that we have per quarter. So it's covered.
Anything else? Hearing nothing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? 7 ayes. Attached, you'll find our significant revenue and expenses for the first half of March. Also on there is we don't have our budget performance. I know.
Your budget performance report, you don't get into the end of it.
Yeah, that's not on there. Next up is our bill list. Our bill list goes as follow. It is $489,655.35, and it consists of payroll number 5 at $190,465.34, payroll taxes $60,265.22, for a total of $740,385.91. Do I have a motion to approve resolution 2024-9?
So moved.
Ms. Watt, second.
Second.
Mr. Labenberg, any discussion? All those in favor, Mr. Lambert?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get to ask you earlier, Shane, but on page 34, there was a charge for $1,185 for moving. It's for the movies in the park.
Yeah.
But is
that's what
that, it got cut off, so is it for one movie or is it for all three? I assumed that because of how much it was,
Yeah.
but it only had the one movie
Yeah,
listed, so,
it's three. It's two in the pool and one out on the field.
all right, that's all, thanks.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? 7 ayes. Our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, May 1st at 11 a.m. on Zoom. And with that, I'll report progress. Community Relations Planning and Development, Ms. Watt?
At our meeting on March 12th, we had the pleasure of interviewing 2 applicants for the Historical Commission, who were both incredibly qualified and seemed like they'll bring a lot of enthusiasm. So I'd first like to move to appoint David Biles as one of the Shelter House representatives to the Historical Commission with a term expiring January 1st, 27.
Motion by
second.
Ms. Watt, second.
Second.
Mr. Hunshine, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? 7 ayes.
Second, I would like to bring forth Christina Seedorf as an alternate member of the Shelter House Historical Commission seats with the term also expiring January 1st of 27.
I'll second.
Motion by Ms. Watt, seconded by Mr. Hunshine. Discussion, Mr. Lindberg?
Yeah, just a question on what the alternate's role actually is. I'm assuming they just fill in if somebody's not there.
Yeah, the way that the ordinance is written is there are representatives of each of the 3 houses. If one of the representatives are unavailable, then the alternate would fill for that meeting and have the same voting rights as the regular member.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one question, Shane. We don't have a residency requirement for that,
No,
correct? Okay,
correct,
I think we specifically excluded that, didn't we?
correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? 7 ayes.
Also, at our meeting, we began the incredibly early stages of discussion about design standards. And tonight I was hoping to get just some feedback from council about what everyone sees as the pros and cons of different approaches. So the least invasive approach we could take is to develop design standards and suggest them to developers through our planning commission. Next would be to implement a traditional design overlay in which we could make broad rules about design standards. And the most intensive would be a full-on historical district, which would require the creation of a historical architecture review board.
Just to clarify, are these design standards for borough-created materials, or is it design standards for people who are coming independently as businesses, or can you clarify?
So it would be for new development if it was for like a voluntary thing through the planning commission. For a historical district, it would be about any updates on properties within the historical district for everyone, every property there.
So my question would be is, if you have a home, let's just say, I know we have several that are from the 1800s, but they're not really historically done now, would that affect them? And if you did a historical district, would they have to change things or?
Do you mind if I get it?
Yeah,
So
if you don't
what
mind.
Ms. Watt is talking about is what's called like Allentown calls it the TINDO, the Traditional Neighborhood Overlay District, right? These are designed to protect historic architecture essentially. What they do is that if you make modification, like there's only certain types of buildings, certain types of construction that are permitted. Think about, trying to think of a good area in Allentown that might be relevant that you could think of. Like, for example, right along, I guess it's Shoe Street, like there's certain like old brick buildings that are only permitted within that district. So what you're talking about here is essentially implementing what they call as an overlay district. It goes above the zoning district, so they have to meet the requirements within the zoning district that we will be addressing with our new zoning ordinance. And then there's this additional step. So if somebody wants to file for, and am I correct in my understanding what you guys are proposing?
Well, so just to clarify, we're not proposing anything yet. I think what Mrs. Watt's trying to do is, we don't want to waste months and months and months on one of the three concepts and then Borough Council, shoot that down. I think what she's looking for is like, these are basically the three different types of things that we could do with design standards as a whole. If you really don't like one of them, I think we want to know that so that we don't like dig deep into it and waste everybody's time and effort and money. But if there's something that like you guys seem to really be in favor of or a concept, then we dig deeper into the concept. And it might even be like, we all need more education and we need to have somebody come in here and explain it more to you. But I think we're just kind of looking at, we're not looking for details today. We're just looking at like, we're trying to create a direction. Because like just saying, hey, we're going to create design standards is the most, like, I mean, that is the biggest weird umbrella that you could possibly try to cast over this, because what does that mean, right? And so as we've talked about it at the committee level, what does that mean? And I think what Mrs. Watt's trying to do is at least take it from way out here to start bringing it in a little bit so that we can concentrate the committee's efforts on at least a general direction, right? I mean, that's
Exactly.
what we're trying to do. That's my understanding anyway.
So I don't know how this fits in or not. I don't personally think there's like any historic district, but there's historic buildings in the borough, and I don't know how that fits into how you're thinking this goes. But
So
per
that-
se, a district, I
I
don't
was
think
gonna
we
say-
have a district that's purely historic in this borough.
I was gonna say that is your problem with a Tindo. Like
Yes.
it has to overlay over something. And if you're talking about multiple sites, you can't basically you're just adding a new restriction to the zoning ordinance. And bear in mind, while we're rewriting the zoning ordinance already, if you're going to create a Tindo, it would be advisable to do so while you're already amending the zoning ordinance, so you don't have to go back to county planning and
I
re-advertise.
totally understand it, but I'm just saying, I don't know how that fits in. I'm just making a statement saying there's no, like, you couldn't take one full block in the borough and say this is a historic district. We just don't have that in the borough. We have individual buildings, but I just
Well,
don't
so
see.
yeah, so let me kind of back it up a little bit and talk about why this was even discussed and brought forth by, I think, a member or two of the planning commission, a couple council members. And that is, if I wanted to build a 5-story building in the downtown and I wanted to make it look like a New York City condo building, I could do that. Or I could put a log cabin up, or I could put whatever it is that I want, because we don't have,
5-story log cabin?
I could put a 5-story log cabin. It'd be amazing.
Or a 5-story manufactured home.
Or a 5-story manufactured home. There's no like consistency with if it's something that Borough Council wants to do, there's nothing that says, hey, if you're going to build in the downtown, in the heart of the downtown, it should be somewhere it shouldn't look like CVS. And CVS is the perfect example of, had you had design standards, a box store wouldn't look like a box store in the downtown. And CVS has built in accordance with the facades of downtowns across America. But those communities had what Mrs. Watt's referring to as design standards. And they've asked them and requested, or they had in their ordinances, that you're going to build in accordance with the general look of what the area looks like, rather than your traditional plop it down because that's the cheapest building that they have. And I'm not trying to disrespect CVS, but that's always been kind of council's burn when it comes to design of buildings in the middle of the community.
Thanks. So I think the point of clarification for me is just, in the minutes, it talks about the historical district, and I know what we're kind of getting at in terms of what do we want our downtown to look like? What do we want our businesses to look like? So can something like that be applied to a downtown district, not necessarily a historic district? I don't know.
Yes, you
Okay.
could tailor it to certain areas if your concern is a specific area that you want design standards within.
And
But
what
it's a-
happens to, oh, sorry, what happens to existing businesses if?
They are not affected.
They,
Yeah.
okay. got
So
it.
I think that was more of the traditional neighborhood approach of the look. The historical piece, right? And that's the one, like the historical district. When you put that kind of overlay on, now if I want to do anything to my building,
It's very restricted.
it's very restrictive. And I go back to, and I've told the story 100 times about the community where the guy just wanted to put new siding on his shed. And their rules were so stringent that the guy ended up knocking his shed down because he just didn't want to deal with it anymore. He said, just forget it. Like, instead of me just putting siding on the shed to prolong it, you want me to put Quaker, or the Quake shingle siding on my shed because that's what matches your downtown that nobody's paying attention to, my backyard and what my little shed that I put my push mower into. But like, that's how restrictive their ordinance got. He literally, I remember the front page articles of, he knocked it down because he just didn't want to deal with it and he wasn't going to pay more money for those wood shake shingles than what the shed was worth.
I mean, he could have requested a variance, but that would have.
He tried.
Yeah.
He tried. They said no. That was the whole burn. Was they denied it. I mean, it was so restrictive. And so I think that's the concern with something like that.
I personally don't want to see regulations like that. I think there's enough regulations just to build something in general. And with that being said, also, if you go through our downtown, there really is no places where you could build a 5-story building unless you tore something down, which I'm not saying that wouldn't happen, but that'd be very expensive to build a 5-story building. So I personally I would like to see the least amount of regulations. I don't see our downtown changing much.
So you see the idea of a voluntary guide for people who are building, as like, we'd like it to look like this.
Yeah, I think the less regulations you have, you're more inviting to businesses. The more regulations you have, it's just going to restrict the businesses that you're going to bring in here because it's hard enough to do it as is right now. Why make it harder? You
Go ahead,
want
Mr. Anderson.
businesses to come into town.
So I was-
Speaking, please.
Yes,
We're having trouble
sorry about
getting,
that.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So I was more in line with the second option that you said, which was the middle of the road. It's not the stringent historical. I agree with Mr. Lavenberg here that we have some very historic buildings here, but they're spread out and it just doesn't fit. But I think some guidelines that you should have to prevent maybe a future CVS looking more like, there's towns that they still build it, but they build it more in the frame of, let's just say like an Armetta's looks like, or, instead of just, the way the building is. So if you were asking my opinion, I'm in the middle.
That's the
second option.
the neighborhood approach, I would say.
So
is what
setting,
you're-
like certain neighborhoods would have design guidelines and others would not, like specifically for downtown, to avoid that particular issue. Mr. Ladenburg, I think that's what they're
Well,
what they're talking.
Yes,
about.
but there's a difference between guidelines, which if it's guidelines, I support it, or regulating where you're saying you have to do it this way. To me, there's a difference.
There is.
So.
Yeah, there is.
I was just going to add that I think some of the concerns that have been brought up have to do with the fact that we've been wanting to encourage more independent businesses downtown. And on one hand, while we keep bringing up CVS, I mean, they have the money to adapt to any design needs and it's easier for them, right? And it's harder for, say, an independent business owner to be able to do that. So I think for me personally, I would need to know more knowledge about what's been done in other communities, what's been successful, or what are some of the drawbacks. In particular, having a unified, cohesive look to a downtown area can benefit independent businesses because it creates a small town vibe that people want to spend time and peruse and stroll and window shop and, so I think it's something that would require some input, I think, from independent businesses and also communities that have something in place on what's been the effect of that.
I'd also like to encourage you to think about it beyond the downtown too. You have neighborhoods, for example. I say Third Street all the time, right? Third Street, all the brick homes, or we go out to the far east side of town where everything used to be built by the same developer. Um,
Stryer
in the Stryer section, exactly. So if somebody's going to build a new building out there in the middle of a neighborhood that was all cottage style building, if you have that overlay, say in that district or that area, it would essentially could require them to build not necessarily stick for stick exactly like the rest of them, but something that's in a similar fashion is what that type of ordinance would do.
And bear in mind, this is only applicable to new construction. It's not if somebody moves in and just buys the building.
Right.
This is if they're tearing it down and putting something up new, it must conform to that standard. It's not the existing building that's being modified. So there's no burden on people who are simply purchasing a building.
So
So
that-
if they tore it
that-
down, they must then comply.
So that's what I'm saying is it'd be too expensive downtown to tear something down and build a 5-story, I'm assuming. So that's,
You'd be surprised with the amount of the lack of available land for certain types of things. People will buy things and tear it down, but you want to make sure it comply. And the intent would be, I believe, to comply with a certain design standard. That only then. Am I correct in my understanding?
Yes.
For that option, yeah.
Yeah,
for
I
that
mean,
option.
the historical district would go further to repairs on
Yeah.
existing properties.
Even type like, I mean, I've seen historical districts go as far as
Yeah.
paint, right? Like
How
you can
only
only,
certain
you can
paint
go to
colors are allowed.
pastel colors. I
Yeah.
mean, you can't, I mean, it can go as far reaching as you wanted to establish it.
my opinion is least restrictive is the route I would like to go. I just don't see, I don't see it changing that much. I don't see the empty lots that we have. I mean, we don't really have any.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, I think Mr. Pepe brought up a good point at the Stryer section. So it is a lot of Cape Cods, and then there was a house built, if you recall, one that's like modern, that is right in the smack. It does not go at all in the community in that area. So it would probably help with something of that nature. But I think what we got to be cognizant of was that we don't want to be like what Mr. Layberg saying, kind of like an HOA. We don't want to go that far, or so.
Right.
I'm just putting, but anyway, that example that you gave of the modernization of a home and it's in a Cape Cod area, it's like, it totally sticks out like a sore thumb.
It's a nice house. Just,
I
it's
mean,
really odd when you're going down, it's same type,
Yeah.
whoa, right? Everybody, I mean,
The
you,
house is cool.
yeah,
I like it.
yeah.
But it's not part of the neighborhood.
And also with the design standards, we'll be able to have formality of business signs and there's a whole pile of other things that would, I believe, go in with the design standards as well. My opinion would be, I think we should consult a few professionals. And this was definitely something that we budgeted some money for during budget time. And maybe get some presentations or whatever, because that could clarify some of the questions that we have that we might not be answering properly ourselves.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. Our next meeting is Tuesday, April 9 at 5 PM. In person and Zoom.
No.
Progress?
Progress.
So what I'm hearing is I think we've got to narrow down to 2 of the 3 options is what it sounds like, right? So, and the reason why I'm asking that is because if we're going to go look at a consultant like you're suggesting, understand like there are people that specialize in this versus this. And we want to make sure that if we're going to talk to consultants or even people that specialize, that we have a general gist of what direction we're talking about. So it very much sounds like the very restrictive historical district is not the will of council at this point. So we'll talk to some people about kind of those other 2 options.
Possible overlays for
yeah.
certain areas. Like, and you guys would have to identify what those areas.
The zoning map would.
Well, yeah,
No,
'cause
not necessarily. I mean, yeah, it
if you're
could. but-
creating, if you're creating overlay districts, yes, your zoning map will have to define, for example, where the Cape Cods are that you want to, keep in a certain, type, right? And, in your downtown district. you-
It's gonna, it would
that's
vary
the
from the
most
zoning map a
restrictive
little bit.
remaining
Yeah,
overlay.
for
Yeah.
a situation like
Yeah.
that.
Do you have to have an overlay district?
So,
You
so you
could
could do,
have-
you could do, you could do a whole overarching ordinance, which is, it's not always the brightest thing to
And
do.
it's probably overkill in this scenario because there's too many specific
And-
zones that you'd want to, you're trying to protect certain zones from being changed.
I think there's a lot of neighborhoods where like this type of thing really wouldn't apply, I think there are neighborhoods though that were specifically designed when they were designed, like the same developer built those brick houses, the same developer built the Stryer section, the same developer or set of developers built certain neighborhoods of the town. And then you have the downtown, which, for the most part, and the central part still has some of those older historic looking buildings. So I think that I think that you'd kind of almost have to, if you're gonna do it, we'd almost have to look at like sections of the community that are very similar, in style and look at those sections. Like I keep saying Third Street, but is that really something that we're interested in kind of preserving that look down that road or not? That's something that I think as you would go through the process, you would determine. It's not something necessarily that today's the day you're looking for that kind of answer, but so it might be outside of what the zoning district shows because, zoning districts are much larger than just streets or neighborhoods. So I think you'd kind of have to dig into each kind of segment of the community. I mean, you can look at a zoning map and you can tell like our town was built in segments. I mean, we can look at the town and see that. So yeah.
Any more discussion? You will find some meeting notes for the various boards and commissions attached. Next up is personal appeals part 2. If anyone has a personal appeal, please approach the podium, state your name and address.
Hi there. My name is Heather Harlan. I live at 554 Seam Street in Emmaus. And I'm here today with 2 appreciations and a concern. So my first appreciation is for the police department. When the president was here, I watched very carefully how the police responded to the protesters who are protesting the war in Gaza. And I was very pleased with how the police handled them, which was allowed them the right to protest without interference. Whereas a half a mile down the road, they were met with riot gear. So I do want to appreciate the appropriate police response to them. Another appreciation I have is for the Parks and Recreation Committee and the Arts Council for all they do. Spring is coming soon despite the flurries outside. And I can't wait to get back into the pool and all of the things that are happening. So thank you to all of you who make those things happen. As you can see, there's a lot I love about living in Emmaus, but I do have a really sincere concern, and it's about Nowhere Coffee and it possibly closing. For me, it's a big community hub, and it's a place where I get to meet with friends and have delicious coffee. And I work from home, so it's a nice break from being with my cat all day. It's been a really nice place for community for the past several years. And I'm very concerned with what's happening. And my basic concern, which, I can talk with Council President Balliet in person about those concerns. But in general, for the board, my concern is about some type of policy that relates to landlord-tenant issues when someone on council is the landlord. And I'm wondering what kind of policy there is in the borough related to those possible conflicts and what could be done about them. I'm very concerned about this.
So with respect to that, every borough council member complies with the ethical obligations that are mandated under the State Ethics Act. So conflicts of interest are regulated that way.
Okay, so I have a question then, if I'm allowed to ask questions in this state. So when, for example, if the inspector from the borough for the food inspector is under the purvey of the school board, of the borough council, like conflicts of interest regarding that, and how does someone
Well,
say?
that's only you're only talking about one person, not the entire borough council and or the borough administration is not guided by that.
Well, so if there is a borough council member who is a landlord, and is having
I
a
understand,
conflict.
I understand the scenario.
Right.
What I'm saying is, unless that particular borough council person is directing it, the borough is simply complying with what their obligations are. Am I correct?
That's
Or
what
you
I'm
j-
trying
you
to
just have
find
a
out.
concern.
I'm a concern if there's a conflict of interest, or if the tenant has a
But you-
concern that there should be someone from outside the borough conducting inspections.
So let me respond directly to you. All part-time employees, including our inspectors, and all full-time employees are directed by the borough manager. No single borough council member has any managerial control over anybody in the borough, including myself. So as I tell them, if I disagree with something they want me to do, I tell them to find 3 friends and vote. And they've heard that from me more than one time over the years. I direct our personnel and our department managers direct them. So Gary Ritter, the health inspector, is under my purview of direct management. This man has no control over Gary. I hire, fire, discipline, and direct everything that Gary does. He also has a board of health that he answers to as well. And he sought both of our advice, and Mr. Balliet does not serve on the board of health. Mr. Balliet has no control over Gary Ritter. I do, and so does the board of health.
So, but if, for example, the tenant requested and wanted an outside inspector, could that happen?
No,
No, it's not, no one can do that. Like,
Hmm.
that's not the process.
It's interesting. I mean, with all due respect, Mr. Pepe, you came to a meeting that I was at and admonished me for asking a question about hiring a police chief. So if I have some bad faith about what might happen if someone expressed dissatisfaction to you when I just asked a simple question about hiring the police, a police chief and a national search, and then like that got you upset, I can see how people might not
I
necessarily
I don't
have the
recall
best feelings towards that.
sure about anything. Do you guys you would have been at the public meeting about that.
About the police chief? Oh, it's when you came to CORE. Communities Organizing Against Racism,
I came to court
or Communities Organizing Against Racism.
or,
You were our guest one night. Yeah,
and I admonished you.
absolutely.
Okay, okay.
So I'm just bringing up that there should be something available for tenants who have concerns and might want someone from the outside if there is a conflict on on the borough council about who's inspecting their properties.
But I haven't,
There's no conflict.
I was gonna say, I haven't heard the legal conflict yet.
Okay, well, I'm not a lawyer. I'm an educator, so I'm doing the best I can.
I'm not, and I'm not trying to be rude to you. I'm simply saying, the conflict is, there has to be a quote unquote direct conflict.
Right, so when the person who owns the property is on borough council,
But
That's a
that
conflict of
person is not
interest.
directing that employee.
well,
You need,
we all live in Emmaus.
insinuation is not fact.
Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and I hope it's something you'll consider and think about as time goes on.
Thank you.
Just for the record, council, I did tell Mr. Ritter that he can get the advice of the health board as well. But my position was, we can say that about a codes officer. We can say that about, we can do that all day long. You guys are all members of the community. That's why you have your setup the way that you do. I mean, that's why it's set up, that you don't have direct managerial control over the employees because of that potential.
Hi, Lauren Vargas. I am the tenant at 318 Main Street, and I am the co-owner of Nowhere Coffee Co. If I'd like to just follow up on what you just said, to clarify, we did ask for that. We asked for him to contact us when he was going to come out to re-inspect, and you authorized him to bring a second person. Rather than doing that, he contacted our landlord directly for access to the building and completed an inspection of our facility without ever telling us when we weren't ready for it. So just to clarify what you are all just discussing right here, that's the conflict of interest. Okay? 12 days after after a leak is not an emergency. That is not emergency access granted by a landlord that is something happening between a health inspector and a city council member. So I would like to get back to my prepared statement. I am here today to express concern with the overall mismanagement of the Emmaus Borough Food Safety System. I fear its current operations are placing the citizens of Emmaus in risk due to its disregard to standards and operating practices. 318 Main Street, the place that hosted the President of the United States 2 months ago, is now not a safe space to be. There are chemicals and lingering moisture in all of our wood surfaces. There is a wet wall that was never addressed after a ceiling leak. There was a new countertop that was installed directly over the water-damaged old countertops. If Mr. Balliet is accepting of unacceptable standards in a building where he breathes in the air and is exposing himself to the dangers every single day, we wonder what is happening in his other buildings, in his other properties, and elsewhere in the Emmaus community. Our employees deserve safety. We deserve safety. The people of Emmaus deserve safety. We are asking you, the president of the council, we are asking you, the head of the Commission of Safety and Sanitary, we are asking you, the head of the manager of all of this, to do better. That is the only thing we are asking of you. We are trying to walk away and walk away clean, but your town deserves better from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Further public comment? Nobody online? Hearing none. Borough managers report.
Sure. So we've hired 2 individuals as part-time DPW employees, Craig Godusky and David Vrabel. Each will be helping man the compost site. Other than that, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I will report progress.
Under president's business, I have nothing. We will not have an executive session tonight. Do I have a motion for adjournment? Mr. Brown, second. Mr. Anders, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? 7 ayes. Thank you.